10,000 years ago, the world stood at the edge of transformation, poised between wilderness and something humanity had never known. For 200,000 years, our ancestors had wandered as nomads beneath endless skies, following herds and seasons across continents. Not just hunters and gatherers, but the inheritors of deep time, carrying within them the potential to reshape the earth itself. What if one decision, made in a fertile valley between two rivers, could end the age of wandering forever? The last ice age was retreating, melting back toward the poles, leaving behind rich soil and swollen rivers. In this new world of abundance, a radical idea was taking root in the minds of our ancestors. They would stop moving, and instead make the earth come to them, bending grass and grain to human will. The fertile crescent stretched like a green sickle across the ancient Near East, cradling the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Here, wild wheat grew tall and golden, swaying in winds that had blown since the age of mammoths. Stone tools that had served for millennia were no longer enough for the work that lay ahead. Our ancestors began to plant seeds deliberately, watching them grow, learning the rhythms of soil and sun and rain. Agriculture was born not in a single moment, but across centuries of patient observation and careful experimentation. With farming came surplus, and with surplus came time to think, to build, to dream of permanence. The first permanent settlements appeared like islands in a sea of grassland, clusters of mud brick homes huddled together. Jericho rose from the desert 8,000 years before the pyramids, its stone tower reaching toward heaven. Can you imagine the courage it took to abandon the nomadic life that had sustained humanity since the beginning? These early farmers were betting everything on the land, trusting that the rains would come and the harvest would sustain them. But agriculture brought new challenges that hunters had never faced in all their wandering centuries. The soil grew tired after years of planting, and populations swelled beyond what small settlements could easily support. Conflict arose over water rights and boundaries, concepts that would have been meaningless to their nomadic grandparents. Yet the experiment continued, spreading like wildfire across the ancient world from valley to valley and plain to plain. In Mesopotamia, between the two great rivers, something unprecedented was beginning to take shape in the alluvial mud. Villages grew into towns, and towns began reaching towards something grander, something the world had never witnessed before. The first true cities were rising from the earth like mountains of brick and ambition and human dreams. Uruk emerged from the Mesopotamian plain around 5,000 years ago, a monument to collective human achievement. Its walls stretched for 6 miles in a great circle, enclosing temples and workshops and markets and homes. Tens of thousands of people lived within those walls. More humans gathered in one place than ever before in history. The city was a living organism, breathing with the rhythms of commerce and worship and the daily struggle for survival. Irrigation canals carved through the landscape like veins, bringing life-giving water from the rivers to thirsty fields beyond the walls. Engineers and laborers worked together, moving earth on a scale that would have astonished their nomadic ancestors who moved with the seasons. With cities came hierarchy, as some individuals accumulated wealth and power, while others labored in fields and workshops. Kings emerged, claiming divine authority to rule over the masses, building palaces that touched the sky, with ziggurats of mud brick. The ziggurat of Uruk rose in massive tiers, an artificial mountain where priests communed with gods who controlled the floods. Religion became organized, formalized, with professional priests maintaining temples that stored grain and distributed rations to the faithful. What would you sacrifice to live in such a place? Surrendering the freedom of the open plain for the security of walls. The city demanded specialization, as no single person could master all the skills needed for urban life to flourish. Potters shaped clay on spinning wheels, creating vessels that could store surplus grain for years of plenty and famine alike. Metal workers discovered that copper, when heated with tin, created bronze, harder than stone and sharper than obsidian. The Bronze Age was dawning, and with it came new tools for farming and new weapons for warfare. Scribes invented writing to track the complex transactions of urban life, scratching symbols into wet clay with reed styluses. Cuneiform emerged in Mesopotamia, the first true writing system, transforming human memory from oral tradition to permanent record. For the first time in history, human thoughts could outlive the thinker, preserved in baked clay for millennia to come. Trade networks stretched across hundreds of miles, connecting cities through caravans that carried tin and timber and precious stones. The city became a hub where cultures collided and mingled, where ideas spread like seeds on the wind of commerce. But urban life brought diseases that hunters had never known, as crowds and sewage created breeding grounds for pestilence. Epidemics could sweep through packed neighborhoods in days, killing thousands before burning themselves out in the narrow streets. The city walls that protected against enemies could not keep out the invisible killers that thrived in human density. Yet still the cities grew, drawing people from the countryside with promises of opportunity and the magnetic pull of civilization. In Egypt, along the fertile Nile, cities rose in harmony with the river's annual flood that brought black soil from the African interior. Memphis became the capital of a unified kingdom, where pharaohs ruled as living gods over a land of pyramids and temples.
The Indus Valley civilization flourished in what is now Pakistan, building cities with sophisticated drainage systems and standardized brick sizes. Mohenjo-daro and Harappa stood as testaments to urban planning, their grid-like streets and public baths suggesting centralized authority and shared values. In China, along the Yellow River, the first Chinese cities emerged, laying foundations for dynasties that would last thousands of years. Each civilization discovered cities independently, as if humanity everywhere was reaching toward the same inevitable destination written in our nature. Not just random settlements, but the fulfillment of something encoded in human DNA, the drive to build and organize and create lasting monuments. The first laws were written to govern urban life, as traditional tribal customs proved inadequate for managing thousands of strangers living side by side. The Code of Hammurabi in Babylon established justice through written law, carving punishments and protections into stone for all to see. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, the law declared, attempting to limit vengeance and create order from the chaos of human passion. Social classes hardened into rigid hierarchies, as the gap between rich and poor widened into a chasm that no individual could easily cross. Slavery emerged as an institution, as prisoners of war and debtors were put to work building the monuments that would define civilizations. The city demanded sacrifice from those at the bottom, their labor building temples and palaces they would never enter as equals. Yet cities also created opportunities for advancement that nomadic life had never offered to the ambitious and the talented. A skilled scribe could rise from poverty to prominence, their literacy making them indispensable to kings and merchants alike. Art flourished in cities, as surplus wealth allowed some to dedicate their lives to beauty rather than mere survival. Sculptures and paintings adorned temple walls,
depicting gods and kings in eternal glory, their stone faces watching over the living. Music filled the streets during festivals, as cities developed calendars marking sacred days when work ceased and celebration reigned. The city became the crucible, where human culture was forged, refined, and passed down through generations in schools and temples. But cities were fragile, dependent on agriculture that could fail if rains did not come or if rivers changed their ancient courses. Warfare intensified as cities competed for resources and prestige, their bronze weapons clashing in battles that decided the fate of thousands. Walls grew higher and thicker as cities learned that their greatest threat often came not from nature, but from neighboring human ambition. Some cities fell to conquest, their populations enslaved or scattered, their buildings reduced to rubble and dust by victorious armies. Others collapsed from within, as internal strife or environmental degradation undermined the foundations of urban life and prosperity. The Indus Valley cities were mysteriously abandoned around 3,800 years ago, their sophisticated civilization vanishing into archaeological silence. Climate change may have shifted monsoon patterns, drying rivers and turning fertile fields into desert that could no longer support dense populations. Yet even as some cities died, new ones rose elsewhere, as if the idea of urban civilization had become unstoppable across the human world. The first cities were more than just large settlements. They were revolutions in human organization and consciousness itself. They transformed us from wanderers into builders, from tribal members into citizens, from oral cultures into literate civilizations that could remember their past. In cities, humans learned to cooperate with strangers, to follow abstract laws rather than personal loyalties, to imagine futures beyond individual lifetimes. The archaeological ruins of these first cities still stand in deserts and river valleys, their broken walls testifying to ancient ambitions. When we excavate their foundations, we find not just buildings, but the birth of everything we call civilization today. Writing, law, organized religion, social hierarchy, specialized labor, monumental architecture, all emerged from those first urban experiments in human living. The cities of Mesopotamia and Egypt and the Indus Valley were laboratories where humanity tested new ways of being human together. Some experiments failed catastrophically, leaving only ruins and cautionary tales buried in sand and silt and the archaeological record. Others succeeded beyond imagination, creating cultural traditions that would influence billions of people across thousands of years of human history. Today, more than half of humanity lives in cities. the inheritors of that ancient choice made in fertile valleys 10,000 years ago. We face challenges our ancestors could never have imagined, yet we still grapple with problems they first encountered in those earliest urban centers. How do we govern large populations fairly, distribute resources equitably, maintain order without tyranny, and create meaning in crowded, anonymous spaces? The ruins of the first cities remind us that civilization is not inevitable, that it requires constant effort and adaptation to survive. They rose from nothing, built by people who had no models to follow, who invented urban life through trial and error and countless failures. They fell when they forgot that cities are not just buildings, but communities. Not just walls, but shared commitments to common futures. Stone remembers what flesh forgets, and the broken bricks of ancient cities still whisper lessons about human ambition and human fragility. In the foundations of Uruk and Jericho and Mohenjo-daro, we can read the story of our transformation from wanderers to city dwellers. Have you ever wondered what it would be like to witness that first moment when someone decided to build a permanent home? The first cities were acts of faith, bets placed on the future by people who dared to believe that tomorrow could be better than yesterday. They changed us at the deepest level, rewiring human society and human consciousness in ways we are still discovering and understanding today. We are urban creatures now, shaped by 10,000 years of city living, carrying within us the dreams and fears of those first builders. The rise of the first cities was not just a chapter in human history, but the beginning of history itself as we understand it. Before cities, there were only stories, passed from mouth to mouth, fading with each generation, like footprints in sand swept by wind. After cities, there were written records, monuments that outlasted their makers, civilizations that could remember and learn from their own past. And in that transformation from wandering to settlement, from oral to written, from tribe to city, we became the humans we are today.